Hey everyone, Regal Reviews here. So today, wearing my Love Gilda shirt and sporting my Gilda / Rosanna Dana hair today. So today's gonna be another video in my I Have Autism series. I haven't made one of those in a while. Probably almost a year since I made one of them. But I did want to touch base on something. So today's video is going to be I Have Autism, Gilda Radner 2. 2 being because I made one about Gilda last year, but this is going to more focus on why Gilda is such an ally for the autistic community. So I know what you're probably thinking. Why Gilda of all people? Why is she an ally? Because when you think of Gilda Radner, you don't normally think of autism. Like, she's known for, obviously, her work on Saturday Night Live. She's known for her humor, how generous she was. Everybody knows she had ovarian cancer. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not one of the first things that people think about when they think of Gilda. But for me, it is because, after a year of finding out this connection I have with Gilda, I learned that she had originally wanted to be a teacher for people with learning disabilities. So what she wanted to be like 50 plus years ago would be equivalent to what a resource room teacher is today. And as somebody who was in resource room kindergarten through 12th grade, and whose resource room teacher is probably one of their best friends 16 years later, Gilda would have made a fantastic resource room teacher. And I feel like, without getting too much into it, I feel like when you're a resource room teacher, you have to have that right personality, because I shouldn't say it like this, but not everybody knows how to handle an Aspie. And I know I shouldn't say it like that, but it's me kind of trying to, make humor about my autism, because it is true. Not many people understand me or understand what I'm going through or how I operate, but resource room teachers are trained, so they do tend to know how we operate and function. So it's not entirely uncommon for people to gravitate toward their resource room teacher. I mean, me in high school, I was in her classroom like every class period. Like, I had my one resource room period, but it was my safe place, and there was this rule that if I was having a meltdown or an anxiety attack, I could go to her room anytime, didn't matter what class I was in, so long as I made up the work from that class. And I always did. But anyway, Gilda, from what I've learned about her, she's a sweet soul, has such a big heart, and so compassionate and so generous. She would have made the perfect resource room teacher. And also too, what's interesting about that is that with Saturday Night Live, Gilda would often draw from her own life experiences, again, which isn't entirely uncommon for writers and actors, to base their characters a little bit off themselves, or take some bits and pieces of their life, add into their story or character. I do the same thing with my writing. What I didn't notice, it didn't occur to me at first, is that one of the first characters that Gilda ever played, minus the sketches she played in Toronto pre-SNL, like, one of the first characters she ever played was autistic. It's her character, Colleen Fernman. And I talked about Colleen Fernman a little bit in my Gilda Night Live blog, which I will include in the video description. And Colleen is confirmed to be autistic. She is confirmed in, I believe, season 4 with Kate Jackson as the host. It's this child psychiatrist skit, and Colleen, the therapist or psychiatrist, says, to me, it's obvious she's autistic. And I will say, for something that wasn't well known in the 70s, Gilda played somebody with autism to a T. Like, she had to have some experience with people with a disability, because, she may have just done research, but again, she would have had to, I guess, known a little bit if she wanted to be a teacher for people with learning disabilities. But anyway, with this character, the character was nonverbal but very intelligent. She would not flap her hands, but I would call it more like finger tap. You see almost in every one of these sketches, she would be on her lap, her fingers would be like this. And it's very common for people with autism to either flap their hands or their fingers, or finger tap, and it's very easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but she does do that with her character in every sketch, and that little detail is a clue. And I will say, she also got the autistic zone out amazing. I know for me, I tend to zone out if I'm tired, bored, or if I'm just thinking about a story I'm writing. My mind never shuts off. I just zone out. I've been in the car before, my mom would be because I'm zoned out. I wasn't, and to be clear, I don't drive. I was always in the passenger seat when I zoned out, So yeah, I was just blown away for something that wasn't well known. Then Gilda knew how to play somebody with autism. And one might say, well, isn't it a little outdated? Well, yes, but you also have to think this was made 50 years ago. So things that were appropriate back then aren't appropriate now. And as somebody with autism, I didn't think any of her sketches were offensive at all. If anything, I thought, it shed light on people with autism. It is the only thing that I would say is a little outdated is when they say the term "she's vegged out." I get it, they're supposed to be funny, and I guess at the time it's better than saying the R word, which they never did say that, because I will get to the other character Gilda plays in a second. But so I give them major props there. They never said the R word, at least with the autistic sketches. They always said "'cause she's vegged out." So I do think that was better than that. But I do think if somebody said today, "Oh, she's vegged out," I would I find it offensive? I don't know, because personally I wouldn't know what they meant by that, and I have to admit, even myself, I had to look up what they meant by "she's vegged out," and basically, from what I got from it, is that she's zoned out, she's in her own world, which today that would more be because she's zoned out. So yeah, so when people ask who's your favorite Gilda character, you know, most people will say Roseanne Dana, Baba Wawa, or Emily Latella, and they're all great. But when people ask me, I always say Colleen Ferdman, and I'm a little biased because, you know, I have that connection with that character. I mean, if we're going for second character, definitely Emily Latella, even though my hair looks like Roseanne Dana, you know. But the interesting thing is, Gilda not only played one character with autism, she played two. Now, this character is not confirmed to be autistic, but she most definitely has like the characteristics and symptoms, and us people that are neurodivergent, we have certain tells that we can, you know, tell each other apart, you know. And they're Colleen and this specific character's named Francine. Francine and Colleen are different in a few ways. And just a little backstory about Francine. So Francine is actually debuted one-time character in the season 2 finale of host Buck Henry. And just a little side note, any episode with Buck Henry as the host, you know that episode's going to be great. And this was the sketch called How Your Children Grow. And basically, even though that character's not confirmed to be autistic, she is confirmed to have a learning disability because they're on this talk show, I guess, and Jane Curtin is interviewing the Buck Henry's character, saying that he works with people with learning disabilities, and both his assistants that are with him have a learning disability. Doesn't say what, but it is confirmed learning disability, and I'm about 99.9% sure Francine is autistic. And the difference between Francine and Colleen is verbal. Like, she does communicate. However, she doesn't communicate like most people do. She has what we call a hyperfixation on punctuating. So anytime Buck Henry's character is talking like I am now, she'd be like, comma, period, exclamation point, begin quotation, close, end quotation. I think it's funny as hell, and personally, I don't know how they were able to keep a straight face through that whole thing. And I give major credit to Lorraine, Buck, and Gilda for, you know, staying in character. I give a lot of credit to Gilda for being able to do that, again, with a straight face, but then also the tone, everything. It just came naturally. But like I said, the difference is Francine can talk, like, but Colleen can. And with Francine, we don't know too much about Francine because she was only like a one-time character, but from what I got, she does speak. She did seem to have the autistic zone out like Colleen did, and like a lot of people with autism do. And it seemed like that was the only way, at least from what we got from that episode, she could communicate. But Colleen still had her own ways of communicating, even though she was nonverbal. The very first season with Raquel Welch as host, it was this One Flew Over the Hornet's Nest sketch, and again, the character's nonverbal, but they're in the famous Bumblebee costume, and Raquel Welch's character says, "Who do you think will win broccoli?" And it took me a few times rewatching that to figure out why the character was named Broccoli, and it occurred to me, oh, because she's vegged out, you know. And she asked, "Who do you think will win?" And she grabs a cigar and was like, and I thought it was so funny. And now that I think of it, Colleen technically did talk once and said one character when they were doing the Mommy Dearest sketch in season 5. She did said thank you, like awkwardly out loud, but basically, you know, she is nonverbal, but it does say a lot because people, it's like a spectrum, like not one, everyone with autism, like it's not the same for everybody else. Like it affects everyone differently. With Colleen, she's nonverbal, but she does have some classic symptoms of autism. Francine, she's verbal, however, she has more of a hyperfixation than Colleen does, and she's able to communicate. Well, I would say is able to communicate more than Colleen can. But the fact that Gilda played two autistic characters, like, that says everything. And it makes me feel even more connected to her. And the fact that it just really pulls out the heartstrings that somebody, you know, it almost feels like Gilda believed in us, you know, like she, and I'm sure a lot of people could agree about this in general, whether you're autistic or not, but Gilda had this thing about her. Like, I just feel like for me personally, like when it comes to autism, I feel like Gilda believed in us and saw us as human beings and not as people who are disabled. Like she wanted, like I said, she believed in us. She wanted to help us. And I think had Gilda not become a comedian, I think she would have been one of the best resource room teachers anyone could have ever had. Anybody would have been lucky to have Gilda as a resource room teacher. And I never found out why she didn't become a resource room teacher, but the fact that she wanted to at that time is huge. And I think I've read that in a couple different places that, a couple different places that she wanted to be. I'm saying resource room teacher. I know it's not what they called it back then, but she wanted to be a resource room teacher. And I remember in one of the articles, I think it was like a, not a news article, but like I guess it was a newspaper article. She did use a term that is very outdated. It was the R word, but I'm not gonna fault Gilda for that because that word was appropriate 50 years ago. And if Gilda were alive today, you know, I feel like she would have evolved from then and evolved, you know, from 50 years ago as, you know, a lot of people, you know, grow and mature and evolve. And I'm not saying Gilda wasn't mature, but that was the term that people used back then. Now, 50 years later, that term is offensive. And I firmly believe Gilda wouldn't have used that word today had she still been alive, because she would have known, like, hey, that is not okay. That's a slur for people with disabilities. I guess what I mean is she would have been progressive. Like, she would have seen, like, hey, this was okay then, it's not okay now, so, you know, I'm gonna I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, she would have, like, changed with the times, because even, like, teaching methods 50 years ago wouldn't work today. And with somebody with autism, one teaching method might work for this person, but it may not work for this person. So you have to kind of tailor it to the individual. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like Gilda was very compassionate, and her heart was just so full of love. Like, I feel like she just embraced us and I'm probably a broken record, but Saha says human beings, and that means so much because unfortunately people with autism, we don't have a lot of allies and we don't have a lot of friends. And I feel like with Gilda, I have an ally and I have a friend. And I feel like Gilda was definitely a trailblazer and most definitely ahead of her time. Any Gilda fan will tell you that. They'll tell you it for different reasons, but one of my reasons being that she was an advocate for people who were mentally challenged and had learning disabilities. So I also think if Gilda was alive today, I definitely think she would have, even like the fact that she didn't become a teacher, I think she still would have done some work with people with disabilities. And I feel like she would have been a really good person to work with. Like, for conversation's sake, if Gilda was starring in a role and she was starring with somebody that was autistic, I feel like she would have been the perfect person to work with because from what I've heard from people, she used to mom people and was very protective and very loyal, and that's the kind of person that people with autism need. They need somebody to advocate for them, and for some of us who don't have a voice or are afraid to use their voice, we need somebody like Gilda to advocate for us, but then also to be there. We need that loyal person because so many people let us down in life. And it's one of those things where people like you 1 second, and then once they find out about you and who you really are, and what I'm saying is they'll treat you one way, but then when you reveal you have autism, they treat you completely differently, shut you out, slam the door in your face. And Gilda's had the same thing happen to her as well, not because she's autistic, but she also had her own trials she had to go through. And she would have known what it was like to go through that, and Gilda knew what it was like to fight alone, because even though she wasn't autistic, she did have an anxiety disorder. And I know people with autism can relate to that because sometimes like anxiety goes hand in hand with autism. Sometimes you have autism and an anxiety disorder. That's what I have. So Gilda understood that aspect because she did have an anxiety disorder, and an anxiety disorder is also something that wasn't understood at that time either. And from what I got, at least from her anxiety disorder, is that, like I said, it wasn't well known then, and so people didn't know what to think of it. Like, Gilda was loved. Like, I have not met or read about one person that didn't like Gilda. Everybody loved Gilda, but they didn't know anxiety disorder, and they didn't know, and again, I shouldn't say how to handle an anxiety disorder, but they didn't know how to, they didn't know anxiety disorders back then. And Gilda had classic signs of anxiety disorder. Like me, it was like textbook anxiety disorder. And I think that was one of the reasons why doctors dismissed her when she was having symptoms of ovarian cancer, is because they said, oh, it's all in her head. Oh, she's just anxious, because unfortunately when you have anxiety disorder or autism, people often don't believe you. They say, oh, she's just making it up, or oh, she's just exaggerating. And at times it looked like, from what I've read, that Gilda did have a lot of anxiety and her mind like didn't shut off. And that's how how mine is. My mind does not shut off. I'm always constantly worrying, constantly thinking about things. Like 100% of the time I'm anxious. And I'm not saying Gilda was anxious 100% of the time, but she was anxious enough that, you know, it was like her mind didn't shut off, and she was always thinking, always anxious, always thinking, oh, what if this happens, what if this, etc., etc. And people didn't understand that, and they didn't know how to help her, and they didn't know how to be the friend she needed. Like she had friends, but they didn't understand her anxiety disorder. And sometimes, again, I don't know how to word this, like she had friends, but they didn't know anxiety, so they didn't always know how to help her and how to be the friend she needed in that time. And even though sometimes one has friends, it does feel lonely because you don't have that person to talk to that understands you completely. They're your friends, but you can't go to them about anxiety disorder, because then there's this wall there, because you're being so open and honest with them, talking about what's going on with you, but then they're just like, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, they don't sympathize with you, or, well, I shouldn't say they don't sympathize, but they don't know what to do because they don't have experience of that. They don't know about it. So you're kind of like dismissed then, and then you kind of feel rejected. And I know with Gilda's club was originated because Gilda's wish was that people that were battling cancer wouldn't have to fight alone. And I feel like Gilda thought that way in general. Like, no matter what battle somebody was fighting or what trials one was going through, I firmly believe Gilda would not want anybody to fight alone, whether you were going through cancer, or you have autism, or you have anxiety. I firmly believe Gilda would never want somebody to fight alone. Like, they would want somebody to know, like, basically be that support, and like feel like now somebody understands me, like somebody believes me, you know. So yeah, I guess to wrap this up, I firmly believe Gilda is an ally for the autism community. I love Gilda. Who doesn't love Gilda? But she is an ally, and I will always say she's an ally, and she is definitely she's definitely a friend, not only to the autism community, but to me. And I have no words. I just have so much love for Gilda, and I know she would have had love for us. And this is going to be huge for me to say, but I know people with autism, we don't like it when people like touch us or something. But had I met Gilda, I would have let her hug me. That is one of the few people I would let hug me. Gilda, I would love that, because I would imagine it would just be all love, and in that moment you would know everything's okay, because that's one person that is your ally and believes in you and fully accepts you, knows you have flaws and knows you're imperfect, but you're beautiful in her eyes, and you're a star. So yeah, comment down below what you think about my video and what you think about Gilda. So until next time, stay regal. Love you, Gilda.